Hello, listeners. We have Answerman John Boyle in the studio today to talk about Asheville Watchdog and their 12-part series on downtown Asheville. It's a series for the second time this month has been named a finalist for a National Journalism Award. Lion Publishers announced Thursday that the Watchdogs Downtown series is a finalist for its Outstanding Coverage Award in its annual contest. From the downtown situation, John, how was the decision made at Asheville Watchdog to do that kind of coverage, number one? And number two, what surprised you in the coverage that
Great
y'all
question.
did?
Great questions. This kind of evolved from I wrote a couple columns, one in December of last year, and then another one in January. I talked to Beth Stickle, who owns a gift shop and floral shop, previously a floral shop
Mhm.
on Haywood Street. She's been downtown over 40 years and just
Mhm.
noticed a real change in the security situation. And she is not a ninny about being downtown. She's been down there a long time, loves downtown, but just said it had kind of gotten meaner, and that the folks they were interacting with were very belligerent. A lot of times the behavior had gotten more erratic. She personally had a delivery van vandalized to the point where it was totaled. So I read about that, and then about a couple weeks later, there was a situation where a couple of different restaurants were being broken into downtown, including the marketplace, and then a bar. And in fact, one guy at the bar was sleeping in the bar at night because he'd been broken into and the door was compromised. He didn't want to get hit again. And they both said too, in fact, William Disson at the marketplace said it was like the Wild West down there. And Sally Keston that I work with, another reporter, said, this downtown thing seems like it could use some more attention. And, having been here since 1995, I've seen it ebb and flow downtown where it's essentially there was no one there in the 90s and to this booming downtown. Had a lot of cops down there at one point, and then you'd started not seeing any. And then, of course, the pandemic changed everything. And she said, I really think it's worth us hitting this full force and sending a whole team of reporters down there for a day, walk around, talk to a lot of different business owners and employees and ask them what they're seeing. And when we did that, we were really surprised. You asked what surprised us about it. We kind of knew there was an issue, but one thing that was astounding to me was how many folks said they had some kind of protection, either a baseball bat or mace or something they were carrying behind the counter. And these are even like, very liberal people who were uh, try to be very kind-hearted toward homeless folks or people going through mental health breakdowns, that sort of thing. But they just said, you know, we talked to 3 dozen different businesses, either the owners or employees, and all told us the same thing. There was only one, and they were kind of down at the end of Biltmore Avenue, that said they hadn't really experienced any problems. But every other one, it was the same kind of thing. Those erratic behaviors, the belligerence, unpredictability, an uptick in crime, and just a general feeling of being unsafe. So that's when we wrote the first part, which was really just detailing that problem. Then that evolved into we had planned on multiple parts. We had not planned on 12 parts, but it presented itself that these are very, very complex issues that need a lot of exploration. So then it turned into a dozen or a baker's dozen by the time we got done.
Mhm. And I concur because the station here is here on Wall Street, and in the self-help building, also known as the Public Service Building, has been
Mm-hmm.
here since 1929. And we've had one of our show hosts come in one night for a late show, and someone was sleeping in front of our door
Mm-hmm.
on the 4th floor. And so the building has installed keypads on both of the main door entries and also on the elevators.
Mm-hmm. We heard that from multiple people downtown in larger buildings with shared bathrooms or shared entry points, where they had found one restaurant manager said they had found people in the bathroom shooting up drugs and then like turning tricks for drugs in exchange for drugs, and just other behaviors that I think everyone can agree can't be tolerated in a civil
Society.
society.
Yes.
Yeah.
Civilized society doesn't put up with that nonsense. I mean, we ain't got time for that.
Well, it's just, I mean, I think we can all agree, you know, public drug use and public defecation, urination, having sex in public places, just it's not it's not the kind of city most people want to live in. I think that's fair to say.
Um, Talking a little bit about independent media, the Neiman Reports and editor and publisher have recently reported a promising trend of veteran news reporters and editors coming out of retirement to report on local news. The growing trend of veteran news reporters and editors are eschewing cushy retirement and returning to report on local news. And Asheville Watchdog is a part of this trend. Certainly, the station here, my husband and I were in retirement, but we saw back in the early Wanda Green days the need for more oversight in the community. And so that's why we're major patrons of this station and understand the need for more oversight.
Yeah, I tease the folks I work with because I'm 59, so I wasn't retired. I was working at Citizen Times and moved over here because I still very much need to work. But they're all I tease them all. It's like y'all just don't know how to retire. They just they retired for a few months. I think they got a little bored. They really love what they do, and they're very good at it. And the other thing that I think helps them, of course, it helps to have people been here a long time and really know the history of the area. Uh, but most of them are relative newcomers, and by that, 6, 7 years in some cases, 2 or 3 years in others. So they're coming at things with a fresh set of eyes, and including the downtown. Because I might have looked at, yeah, we need to do a story or two, but to kind of realize that a big tectonic shift had taken place was came from them, from them looking at things like, yeah, this seems really bad, and in comparison to other places we've lived, it seems really bad. And we found that too with several of the folks we interviewed, who had moved here from other places. Talk about things that are surprising. That was one thing. A couple of folks from big cities said they feel it was worse here than what they had come from. But that trend that Neiman pointed out is very much real, and it's a different model. We're a nonprofit. We rely on donations. We do have 3 paid employees now, myself, Andrew Jones, and Keith Campbell, the managing editor. And we've got, these retirees who work for the New York Times and the large papers in Florida, Pulitzer Prize winners. So we got some folks with really good chops, and it's great to utilize that expertise, because otherwise it wouldn't, and these some of these stories have been doing just wouldn't get done.
Yeah, that's certainly true. When they made their first announcement back about 3.5 or 4 years ago that they were going to start doing this, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is just so needed. And so while we're on that subject of the Watchdog being supported by community donations and monthly accounts, how can people get in touch with the Watchdog?
Well, you can find us at AshevilleWatchdog.org, AVLWatchdog.org, and our site is free. That's another thing that really appealed to me. There's no paywall. You will get these pop-up things that ask you to just sign up for our news alerts. So basically, whenever we send out a story, we let folks know via email, and they will occasionally ask you to donate if you can. But everything's free. There's nothing behind a paywall, and that appealed to me too, because you're keeping, if you are donating, you're keeping all this money local. It's not going to a corporate entity at all, or to pay off a giant loan or something. it's staying right here. And the other thing that's been heartening to me is just a response from folks. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten, phone calls just thanking us for hitting some of these topics, especially the downtown. I think the city and the police department, a lot of folks were kind of, I don't know if asleep at the wheel is too harsh, but this had gone on too long, and there was definitely a sentiment that it had gone on too long. So it was when we shined a light on it, folks were really appreciative of that.
What do you contribute to it going on too long until you all raised a huge spotlight on it?
I think complacence maybe, and also this feeling of, like I mentioned, when you've been here a long time, you see downtown ebb and flow. I do think we heard from several downtown merchants and employees that they really felt unheard and they felt uncomfortable bringing this up because sometimes they would be, uh, what's the right word? Kind of poked fun at or called whiners for people saying, "Oh, well, oh, you can't handle living in a downtown or working in a downtown. That's what downtowns are like." And some of these critics didn't really accept that things had changed. Uh, One thing that definitely had changed was the police presence, and you've probably talked about that on there. They're down 40% after 2020. They had a real exodus of officers. The downtown used to have its own which also had a public bathroom, but it was staffed by officers. And then you used to see officers on bike patrol downtown quite a bit. And that was reassuring to folks. I've heard several different police say, presence makes a difference. Just it's kind of like in school when if the principal comes by and you're cutting up in class, you're not going to cut up in front of the principal, or the person in charge of the discipline at school. And it's a similar thing. So I think it had just gotten to where there's less police, pandemics hitting, that sort of made there's an influx of drugs in Asheville. A lot of cities have dealt with that. There was from what we found, fentanyl's everywhere and they put it into everything now. But there's also been an uptick in methamphetamine, which is a drug that just makes people real wired up and can make them very aggressive. And when you combine that with fentanyl, one officer, Captain Mike Lamb, well, he's a deputy chief now, described it as kind of like your body fighting itself. The fentanyl's trying to chill you out and zone you out, and then the meth is making you hyped up and crazy, and it just results in some really atrocious behavior at times.
Yeah, I've seen that. You can see people, they actually look like they have almost a case of Huntington's chorea. They're so jerky in their
Mhm.
movements.
They call it tweaking, is what
Yes.
the officer called it. And one guy, we stopped downtown one night. I did a ride along with him, and there was a guy, and he said this guy's well known to police, generally harmless, but was clearly tweaking very badly, sweating profusely. It was about 55 degrees. And he's sweating profusely and jerking around, sitting down, standing up, lying down, kind of grabbing his stomach. It was just couldn't stop
Mhm.
himself from that kind of movement. And again, he walked off, was kind of talking to himself. He wasn't posing a problem to other folks, but we've heard a lot of stories about homeless people screaming at other people or getting up in their face, wanting them to give them a handout or something. They don't. It created a lot of ugly encounters downtown.
Yeah, and I moved here from New Orleans back in '89. And
Hmm.
one of the reasons that I moved here is that there were no burglar bars downtown.
Mm,
And I actually mentioned that to people, and they didn't even know what burglar bars
yeah,
were.
yeah,
But now I can see, that that's coming here. And New Orleans has a reputation for being kind of a wild and woolly place, and
right.
I hate to see us evolve to that situation here. Some of
Yeah, I
the
think that
Go
the
ahead.
I think they're very aware of that. The mayor, city council, the mayor told us early on in this series that she works downtown every day. She's seen it. Sage Turner felt it very personally because she's has worked downtown for a long time and feels like a downtown advocate. They agreed that it has gotten out of hand. I think that's why they did the 60-day initiative, which was, you probably have talked about that before, but it was a higher presence of police officers, also firefighters, public employees in general, and then more cleanliness and encouraging businesses to have better lighting, have window locks, have door locks, that sort of thing. And then they decided to extend that and essentially make it permanent because they realized it is helping and businesses want it.
Well, somewhere in that 12-part series, it was written about how much money has gone to helping organizations to deal with the issues and obviously be a support to the homeless people. But it seems like the number was 17 million or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, if you look at it, um, you know, kind of a per capita way for homeless people, it's tens of thousands of dollars every year. And then, of course, there's a lot that goes to other folks too, as far as treatment options, that kind of thing. It's really, really expensive to try to get a grip on these problems. And I was at a forum the other day. The Leadership Asheville Buzz Breakfast moderated it, and someone asked the city manager if about spending on these programs and how expensive they are, and she said she didn't feel the city spending enough. That there's and other organizations as well. That there's millions of dollars coming in here, but the problems are so extensive and often intertwined. I can't tell you how many people, officials, public safety told us there's a combination almost always of mental health and drug issues. You can argue over which one came first, but a lot of people with a mental health issue try to self-medicate, turns into a problem, an addiction, or people have an addiction and that exacerbates mental health or causes a mental health problem. So then you need uh, more treatment beds, and we just don't have enough. If we did a mental health story on this, that the wait times 3-4 weeks to get into a place. If somebody's in a crisis, they usually can get in at least to admissions ER, but it's tough to get a bed anywhere. And then, of course, we've got the issue of the enough places for homeless folks to stay in the city. In the county have contributed quite a bit to Homeward Bound's project over on Tunnel Road for a hotel transformation that will cost millions to house. I think it's 85 people and provide a lot of services for them too. But yeah, all of this is very expensive. And then on the backside of it, if you don't try to get ahead of it, you end up with folks essentially in jail, and the jail becoming a mental health, a de facto mental health treatment center. That was another surprising element. It wasn't all that surprising. I'd heard some of it before, but more than half of the people that come into the jail have a mental health issue or substance abuse. Probably way more than half.
Mhm.
It's so the jail have you can't stop providing medications, and you need to get folks treatment. So it's become a de facto mental health treatment center.
And they're not equipped to handle mental health.
Now, sheriff said that the other day. He was at that forum and said, our folks, they're offering some training and like crisis intervention and de-escalation, that kind of thing, but they're not mental health providers.
Right, they're not
Yeah,
professionals.
right.
So given the amount of money that's going in now and the expense of that is going out to people, is there some sort of overall accountability on, are the programs that we are supporting, are they working?
Uh,
Are they helping?
Yeah, that's a great question because I know folks feel they don't. I asked this panel the other day. Michael Woods was on there from the Western Carolina Rescue Ministries. Uh, Sheriff was on there, Chief Zach, Deborah Campbell, and David Plyler with the Coalition for Public Safety. If we're enabling homeless people and by providing all these services, bringing more folks in, and the general consensus, although David Plyler said, you kind of get what you tolerate, and we are sort of a beacon, is that you have to provide services. Michael Woods thought we are to the point of enabling some folks.
Well, and Michael Woods, I believe in your 12-part series, mentioned that many of the people that we see panhandling are being human trafficking victims.
Well,
And I don't know if that was your series
we
or someone else.
we mentioned that, and are looking into that some. It's I don't know if it's human trafficking. I think it's more of some of it is organized, where these folks might be drug addicts and they have a supplier who will supply them with drugs if they go out and panhandle for 8 hours and give them 80% of the take, for instance. We've heard that kind of story. And Michael Woods has said that before, that it does seem to be an organized issue. So again, all of this just gets very complicated, and trying to solve it is very complicated.
Yeah, and the pandemic did not help the situation at all. My own observation is that if you were kind of on the financial edge when the pandemic hit, you're probably on the street now. And being on the street is not an easy thing to do. I had a friend of mine back who was a pastoral counselor in New Orleans, and he was a very hefty, strong-looking guy, and had said that he felt that the people who make it off of the street have a sense of some sort of courage and personal strength that they can tap into that he didn't think he could even come up with.
Mm-hmm.
That once you get to that level, it's going to take a tremendous amount to pull you out of that situation. And how are you going to do it? Or are you just going to die on the street?
Well, that's it. It's very true. It's it's easy to be judgmental. I think we all fall into that.
Yeah,
You see
certainly.
somebody out there with a sign, and I've kind of just tried to come to the point, like you don't know what their life story is. You can ask. A couple of the people that we talked to just had horrific life stories of, being abandoned at age 3, doing drugs by the time they're 12, heavy drugs, things you and I can't imagine, or general population, I think, probably can't imagine. And it's so you have these issues, and they're very public, exacerbated by the pandemic, as you mentioned, because financially, also just the loneliness of it created a lot of mental health stresses on everybody. And then if you're in a financial crisis on top of that, and think about losing your home, or you have a health crisis, medical crisis, and that exacerbates it. Yeah, it just becomes where it spirals out of control. And then to try to fix this is super expensive, and we don't.
And I think it's, sometimes the federal government has to do what cities and counties and cities and states cannot do with, highways and that sort of thing. Well, I think this is a big enough crisis happening. The United States is, by GDP, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and has been for over a century. And so surely with those vast assets that we have, somehow we can address this very complicated issue nationally. I mean, after all, we did put a man on the moon. Remember
Right.
that?
Right. There's things that we know that work. We looked at some other cities where programs are working better than they are here, and Asheville's working on some things, a couple programs that are very sort of cutting edge or new. The community paramedics for one, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, it's you know, to say that we can't solve it is seems kind of un-American, because like,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
we put a man on the moon. We just, one thing historically, and I'm sure you know this, because North Carolina, I don't think was any different than any other state, but there was a big shift probably 30 years ago to kind of deinstitutionalize mental health
Yes.
substance abuse sufferers. So a lot of these facilities closed or were greatly downsized, and they had become problematic. There was abuse within them. The
Mhm.
treatment was terrible at times. Their movies were made about how bad they were,
Right.
and so, but the
Yes. One
solution
flew
was,
over the cuckoo's nest.
yeah, so let's get rid of those, and we'll privatize everything or most of it, and we'll fund it, and then they cut the funding, and then you end up with not enough of the private institutions, and they have a for-profit model because they have to make money, and so they just can't offer enough treatment, enough beds. We heard that over and over again. Just even with Mission opening this new hospital, the mental health facility on Sweeten Creek Road, I think it's 132 beds. Might not have that number exactly right. Might be 140, but it's going to increase beds by about 37 because they had Copestone previously. Uh, and all the folks we talked to said it's just not enough. It'll help, but it's not enough. So yeah, I think there needs to be more of a commitment from federal government and state government too. There was talk, they haven't finalized their budget, but there was talk earlier on about $1 billion going towards mental health and uh, behavioral issues, addiction, all of these kind of things. So, and again, having said that, you can't just throw money at things
Right.
and expect.
That goes back to accountability. Is it
Right, right. You
helping
got.
or are you enabling? And there is this huge difference. I mean,
Mhm,
I have some 12-step background myself, and I understand the difference between helping and enabling
mhm.
behavior.
Yeah, there was another forum I did because all of this is really, really a hot button issue. It's about opioids and fentanyl in particular downtown. And there was a guy there. He works for the county, I believe now, but said he had been in treatment programs 26 times, and he's drug free now and has been for a number of years. But that's another thing, it just takes some folks one or two times they will remain drug or alcohol free. Other folks, it's back in revolving door, which is incredibly frustrating for their families. And a lot of times, families will just kind of disavow them, and then where does this problem end up? On the streets downtown because
Right.
they're homeless, they have nowhere to stay, they have no, and a lot of folks too don't take their meds or they're not getting access to the
Mhm.
meds they need. And so again, just hugely complex problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank Asheville Watchdog for their coverage of it. It was certainly revealing, and I'm uh, looking forward to seeing what else y'all have coming down the pike. Can you mention anything that's coming up?
Well, I I've we've got a couple of good stories, and we have another big project coming that I will just say has been a hot button issue around here, and I think folks will appreciate a little deep dive into it. Um, but I don't want to tip off too
All
much.
right, so we'll be waiting with bated breath. Well, I want to thank you so much, John. Go ahead and mention again. I'm running a banner along the top of lower part of
Right.
the screen here for people who view the interview. But let's go ahead and mention again
Sure.
how people can support Asheville Watchdog and independent media in the community, which is
Right.
so needed.
Yeah, it's Asheville Watchdog. If you Google that, it'll come up, and it's avlwatchdog.org. And we are a nonprofit. And when you go on there, there's a way you can donate. There's also a way you can reach me and other folks directly. If you click on any of my columns, my contact information is down at the bottom. And I always welcome questions because I still do the Answer Man column, Q&A thing, and then, do other stories. So I always appreciate people reaching out And we are fortunate in our area. We've got some really great local independent media, and we appreciate the public support.
Well, thank you so much, and we will sign off.
Thank you for having me on, Devine. I really do appreciate it.